Dr. Kamal Abu Safi is a medical paragon of virtue and grace who refused to leave the Kamal Adwan hospital in Gaza when Israel leveled their tanks and their guns at the hospital, despite the fact that Israel had already murdered his son, that Israel had already wounded him. He refused to leave his patients and his staff, dozens of whom have now perished, and the good doctor has been taken away into an Israeli dungeon where previously another high-ranking medical practitioner in Gaza was raped to death. Let me say those words again: raped to death. If that doesn't get your blood running faster, I don't know what would, other than the shameless, shameful, unforgivable, unpardonable repetition of the Israeli lie that this gifted and dedicated doctor is in fact a key operative of Hamas, repeated ad nauseum all day on every Western news outlet. It is utterly revolting that the so-called journalistic profession, broadcasters, writers everywhere have been silent about the massacre of hundreds of their fellow journalists in the course of 15 months and are still ready to repeat these foul Gobbelian lies. You remember when the first hospital in Gaza was attacked by Israel and set on fire. Anyone who claimed so was committing a blood libel against the Jewish people. A blood libel, they called it. And the entire Western media ran away from the story and began instead to regurgitate the foul lie that the strike on that hospital had been a misfiring Hamas rocket. You don't believe me? Look it up. Look back. It was only 15 months ago, for God's sake. Israel has now destroyed and releases footage of it destroying 18 out of the 20 hospitals in the Gaza Strip, and the remaining 2 are no longer functional. Such has been the level of destruction that they have suffered. Nurses and doctors in their legions have been killed, wounded, and thrown into dungeons where, as I said, at least one of them, an eminent, globally recognized surgeon, was raped to death. That's why I received the news of the human rectum, that is Benjamin Netanyahu's third stage prostate cancer, this very evening with a kind of meh. I would prefer him to survive it. I want to see him on trial like Eichmann, like the butcher, torturer, mass murderer, Eichmann. That's where I would like to see Netanyahu. But he can't be looking forward to the judgment day if the surgeon's knife were to slip this evening, if the antibiotics were not to work this evening. He cannot be looking forward to the hellfires to which he is surely destined. The massacres in Gaza continue, even although the entire north of Gaza has been ethnically cleansed. 76% of all buildings in Gaza have been destroyed. 93% of all people in Gaza are now homeless. There is no clean water. There are no medical facilities extant. There is no decent food. The people are suffering from malnutrition at best and starvation at worst. And nobody gives a toss about it. No politician talks about it, except when they have to give it their undying support. That's the fundamental sickness in the Western world. And there are some who originate, ethnically speaking, in the Eastern world, but live in the Western world, who don't want unity around this question, who don't want to unify the largest number of people possible, irrespective of their religious predilections, their religion, they're part of a religion, they're part of a schism in a religion. They're not ready. In fact, they have declared the end of what they called the marriage of convenience in defense of the people of Gaza. To hell with them, I say. The people of Gaza are still bleeding. The people of Gaza are still starving, still dying of thirst and want. And until and unless there are no Palestinians left in the world, Palestine will still be the heart of the matter for us. And we will still seek to unite everyone that we can in defense of those Palestinian people. You see, for some people, Palestine was not the main question. They only pretended that it was. But for us, it remains the number one foreign policy question in the world, the moral center of the world. And we will not relinquish it, despite the siren voices seeking to lure onto the rocks of separatism, extremism, fanaticism, and danger those who have been with us in their millions in this country all this time. We will not relinquish it. We will never leave the Palestinian people alone, even if others do. I mentioned that latter point because the head of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, who is now the new dictator of Syria, has just announced it will be 4 years until the people of Syria are allowed an election to pick a president. It's normal, yeah? It's normal that you fight for democracy and against dictatorship, and immediately, on the force of arms given to you by Western countries, I just saw, by the way, a picture of an ISIS fighter in Syria, in Damascus, wearing not only the ISIS patch, but carrying a rare and brand new Belgian submachine gun. Of course, someone else probably paid for it, likely Saudi Arabia, which was thanked by name by the dictator of Syria, Al-Jolani, this very day, who thanked Saudi Arabia for everything that they had done to give birth to the new Syria. The new Syria in which they're fleeing, shouted the exultant crowd as the Christian population of Malula, the holiest place in Christendom, in my opinion, the holiest place I have ever been, where Mother Agnes, Mariam de la Croix, there she is with Gayatri and me in earlier times, and her nuns, and the priests and the clergy, and the remaining Christians who speak Aramaic, the language of Jesus, are being ethnically cleansed from the grottos, from the cliff-top churches and monasteries and nunneries. They're fleeing. Shout the exultant fanatics who are driving them out for fear of the kind of massacre they already suffered at the hands of exactly the same people in 2013. The mess that is Syria is the worst thing that we have ever done. We've done some very, very bad things. It is the worst thing. It's worse than Iraq. It is the worst thing because we have visited upon a now helpless population, disarmed, its weaponry destroyed, its territory occupied by Israel, by Turkey, and by the United States of America. But the central part of Syria is now ruled by the people who not 10 years ago were cutting out their hearts and eating them live on camera because they were of a different faction, a different religion, a different denomination. It is truly unspeakable that these men in suits in Washington and London, Paris and Berlin, it is truly unspeakable that they have visited this terror on the people of that region. Now they hope, like Dr. Frankenstein hoped, that having made this monster, it will remain under their tutelage and control. Well, it probably will in relation to Israel. They've made clear as day, that the days when Syria would base the Palestinian resistance are over. The days when Syria would be a transmission belt for the wherewithal of the resistance in Lebanon and in the West Bank and Gaza could defend themselves against their occupier are over. But of course, these Uzbeks and Chechens and Uyghurs and Albanians and Frenchmen and Welshmen and Turkomen and all the alphabet soup that is the HTS, the Al-Qaeda offshoot, will soon be bored murdering Christians and beheading Alawites. Apart from anything else, the day will come when there are no Christians left in Syria, just like what happened in Iraq next door. They will soon be looking for other places to go. Have gun, will travel. Better hope they're not traveling anywhere near you, armed to the teeth, bred in tooth and claw with other people's innocent blood. Better hope they're not headed towards you. There are so many other things going on in the world. The collapse of the British government in the affections such as they were for the Labour Prime Minister Keir Starmer have created in just 6 months a political crisis in the ranks of the governing party. For having been a member of Parliament myself for almost 40 years, let me tell you, there is nothing more important to the vast majority of members of Parliament than that they should continue to be members of Parliament. It's a clean job, no heavy lifting, good wages, carpets are thick, upholstery soft. People call you sir. People in uniform call you sir. They don't want to leave it. They don't want to lose it. But today's opinion poll shows that 200 Labour members of Parliament, if there was an election tomorrow, would be dumped on the steps of Westminster before anyone other than those who benefited from their fat salary and expenses checks even knew that they were there. Nothing concentrates the mind more powerfully than the knowledge that one is to be hanged in the morning, said Dr. Johnson. Well, these MPs, looking at that opinion poll, know who they are. So my prediction to you is that before 2025 is out, the Labour Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, will discover that it was all too much for him, and that for the sake of his mental health and his future earnings on the Tony Blair gravy train, that it's time to hand over, not to a lean and hungry man, for Wes Streeting is neither lean nor hungry, but he is darkly ambitious, and he's already on maneuvers. Lastly, Joe Biden is still at least sentient enough to give an interview. We presume he gave it and that it was not ghosted, in which he said he regrets having withdrawn from the presidential race and believes that had he stayed in, he would have beaten Donald Trump again, beaten him like a toy drum, as he's fond of saying. But the truth is that the Democrats cooked their goose when they rigged their rules to shoehorn a dementia patient into the saddle for one more battle as their candidate for president 2024. And when the lies and deceit about his mental collapse became undeniable to their major donors and to, crucially, those that still run the Democratic Party, the Clinton and Obama families, when it could no longer be denied, they replaced the idiot with the fool that was Kamala Harris. They remain deep in denial, and we'll be talking about Egypt later in the show also. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.